Hello everybody, my name is Steven Risnick and I am going to introduce you to the world of investor visas for people who are interested in immigration. I'm going to show you the E, the L, the EB5, mention the H1, and at the end of this conversation you are going to understand what it takes to enter the United States as an investor. You'll know as much as you'll get from any consultation with an immigration lawyer. I've been doing this for 26 years. We're one of the under 1% of law firms that practice both business and immigration law, so I'm going to have some very unique perspectives for you, and I hope you enjoy the slide presentation and the information that I'm about to provide for you. Shall we? All right, everybody, let's get started on this journey. I'll be as brief as possible, but as succinct as possible. Investors, now, let's talk about generally the E-visa, which is one of the more popular visas. The E-visa is for people from treaty countries. Treaty countries, to be very general, are primarily Canada, Mexico, most Western European countries, but there are a whole list of countries that qualify. And you can go on our website, myimmigrationattorney.com, and have a look at all the countries and see which ones qualify. Some qualify for what's called the E1, which is treaty trader. And that's for people who are involved in import and export, where at least 50% of the export is with their home country or import. And the other one is the E2, which is the extremely popular one. And that's where people simply invest in a business. You can start a business, purchase a business, you can purchase a franchise, and it's a very good visa for a number of reasons. For example, if you're not from a treaty country, you're going to have to invest $500,000 in the EB5 program if you're looking to invest in the United States and don't own a business back home. Now, with the E2 visa, you can invest as little as $100,000 and you can get an E2 visa. One thing you should know about visas are all temporary. However, the E2 visa is a very unique animal, which in 26 years, I still haven't figured out how they come to this, but it's renewable indefinitely, as long as you have the mental intent to return to your country of origin at some unknown time in the future. So many people renew it year after year after year, and they end up dying before they manifest the intent of retiring in their own country. But at the end of the day, the main thing about the E2 visa, because the E1's not that popular, so I'll talk about the E2, is that you can be here, you can renew it, and the problem that you face, though, is you cannot get a green card with that visa. But it's not the end of the world, and we also have a solution called the reverse L1, where you'll set up an E2 company. Let's say, for example, you buy a sandwich franchise in the United States, and then you'll set something up back home or in another country that you're comfortable with, and you'll run the two operations. So now you'll be an executive of an international company, and then you can, having done that for a year, you can apply for an L1 and get out of the E2, and a year later you can apply for a green card under the EB1 category, and a year after that you can get yourself a green card if everything falls into place and you meet all the requirements. But the nice thing is, and we'll discuss that more with the L1, is we don't have to advertise the job, we don't have to prove you're the best one for it, although it's not a walk in the park. There are a few other things that you have to prove. So the E2 visa, for example, has been used for a number of things. You know, we don't have a retirement visa in the United States. But what can you do? You can come here, invest in a company. You don't have to run it from day to day. In fact, they don't want you to compete in the labor market. But you can be the executive. I mean, I had one client who sat out on his yacht in San Diego Bay, made all the decisions by telephone. He was an active investor. He didn't waste time in the company because he wanted to enjoy his tan. It worked. So they prefer that you be the executive, the decision maker, rather than somebody working in your own company. So we've used it successfully for retirement. The LGBT community, especially before gay marriages were allowed, this was another way that two people could be together, where before the partners didn't have a choice. Students, have set up companies, or people who were fired, for example, from their job in technology before it got feverish. Which you could do, let's say an employer for whatever reason couldn't file what's called an H-1B visa, which is for people in a specialty occupation. What they would do is, some of these people were very innovative and they would start a company. So they would consult in that area. Now, they couldn't have their employer be the only client, but certainly one of the clients, and then they built a firm from there. And that's especially handy when you have a situation like we had last year where we run out of visas the first day. So the e-visa offers a lot of flexibility if you're from an e-visa country. Now let's look at this slide over here. You know, the three major ways. Now, I'd like to eliminate the H1. The H1 is a work visa with a limited duration, but it's got what's called dual intent, which means you can apply for a green card while you're here on the visa. However, if you can be fired from your own company and meet a few other requirements, you can have the corporation or the LLC from your company sponsor you for an H1. Very hard to win. I really wouldn't recommend it, especially not when you have these three vehicles available. So the L1 visa is for people or entities who have controlling interest in two different countries. So let's say that you have a restaurant in England and you want to open up a motel, a restaurant, a dentistry practice, whatever it may be, in the United States. Now you have to keep the foreign operation operational. You can't shut it down. It'd be the worst thing that you could do. So you keep it operational. You become a manager or executive of an international firm. And if you meet the definitions of, executive, gray matter, decision maker, or manager, you don't have to manage people. You can manage a function, a department. There's several ways that you can enter into that category. Then you would qualify for the L1 visa. It's becoming very, very hard to achieve. They're challenging these cases a lot, but at the end of the day, it's wonderful because once you've gotten the L1, which is valid for up to 7 years if you're a manager or executive, which is the L1A, you can apply for a green card and get it a year after that under the EB1 or employment-based, also called EP1, Employment Preference 1, and you don't have to advertise a job, where with any other category, or not any, but with the primary category, which is EB3 or EB2, you have to advertise a job, you have to go through the resumes, prove nobody's more qualified, it takes several years to get, there's a lot more involved. So it's actually a very clean mechanism for getting a green card, and in fact, if I had the choice, I would choose an L1, even if it meant staying in my foreign country for another year and setting up a company and growing it, over the EB5, which we're going to explain a little bit later. So the L1 is actually a fantastic visa. I mean, I'm a big fan of that visa, but you need to know what you're doing. They're hard to get. The E2 visa, a wonderful visa. Again, it doesn't lead to a green card. You must be from a treaty country or from Australia. Again, you can see the entire list on myimmigrationattorney.com. And then the EB5 for people who invest $500,000 to $1 million in a company and employ 10 persons. A little bit riskier. We'll discuss it more at length. Let's go on to the next slide. Let's talk about the L1. Again, don't sell your company abroad because you have to keep it operational. You can't be an international manager if there's no international company. And you have to have worked in that company for 1 year out of the past 3. And you don't have to work in the United States full time. I mean, you can travel back and forth between the companies, but it has to be most of your time on a regular and systematic basis because obviously you have to be running the show at some level. There are a number of things, affiliate relationships. Primarily, you could have a branch, subsidiary, or affiliate. An affiliate basically means that you have majority ownership of the company back home, and the one here. So you don't have to own 100% of both of them. You're welcome to have partners. You have to work as a manager or executive or a person with specialized knowledge. Now the difference between specialized knowledge and the other two is this. The L1A is for people with who are managers or executives. These people can qualify for the EB1 green card. People with specialized knowledge can only remain a maximum of 5 years, whereas the L1As can stay up to 7. So the specialized knowledge people do not qualify for the EB1 green card. And again, the intent must be temporary. And here's a very interesting thing. Although your intent with any visa must be to come and leave the United States, they have something called dual intent. And certain visas allow you to have a dual intent simultaneously, and E and L are two such visas, where you can have the intent to remain temporarily and the intent to remain permanently. You go figure that one out when you're having popcorn tonight. Let's go on to the next slide and continue with this. Manager executive, 7 years, as I mentioned to you. An executive, you don't have to necessarily be in charge of people. You can be in charge of a function or a division of the company. Again, having lots of discretion, the brains, the control of the firm, for example, if you're an executive. In other words, you have to be at a high level. Let's go on to the next slide. Keep you rolling here. Manager manages the entire firm, department, a higher organizational level, supervises and controls supervisors, professionals, and managers. In other words, you're not a frontline person. You can hire, fire, recommend personnel directives. Specialized knowledge, you can have specialized knowledge of the way the company operates. For example, we're a very unique company where we combine business law, immigration law, and management consulting into one firm. In fact, we're the only one in the country of its type. So if we were in a foreign country coming here, the people working for us know things that the average person would not know, because the average person either works for a consulting firm or a law firm. We have both, so we're a very unique animal from that perspective. And so somebody would qualify under specialized knowledge. And, you know, there are many different categories of how they can come in under that. Let's look at the next slide. There's something called blanket L1s. It's very handy where you have several people coming from your company, and you only have to have worked for it for 6 months. But if they didn't work for your company abroad for 12 months, they don't qualify for the EB1 or EP1, and the initial approval for that is 3 years. It's only works for companies that are for-profit. Company has to have a minimum of 3 domestic and foreign branches. Let's go on to the next slide. In the E, which I discussed earlier when I opened the discussion, great visa because of the flexibility of use. You know, you can buy a company, start your own, purchase a franchise. You have to be from a treaty country, that's the only catch. It's difficult to obtain the green card, but what you can do, for example, let's say that you're married, your wife or husband, whatever the case may be, can work somewhere and have somebody apply for what's called an EB3 or an EB2 green card, where you do have to advertise the position, and they get a green card and you can get one as a derivative of theirs. So that's one way of doing it, and the other way is what we call the reverse L1. We end up setting up a company abroad and then qualifying for the L1 and changing over that way. So that's an interesting one. Let's go on to the next slide. These are the treaty countries to give you a bit of an idea. Argentina, Armenia, for example, is E2 only. You've got Australia, Austria, Bangladesh is E2 only, Belgium, Bolivia, etc., etc., etc. Many Western European countries, Canada and Mexico, but again, they're all on our website, myimmigrationattorney.com. Let's go on to the next slide. I've discussed this with you. You know, E1 is for import-export, E2 is for other business investments. Now, passive investments do not qualify. You can't just put money in the stock market, have somebody manage it for you, and you're in the country. Having the money in a bank account doesn't do a thing for you. Some countries qualify for the E1, which is import-export. Not many clients call us about that, and some of them qualify for the E2. And if you're an employer, the company must be owned at least 50% by treaty nationals, of course. And the United Kingdom has a special rule regarding being domiciled there. On to the next slide. With the E1, only international trade counts. Can also be a trade of services, for example, can be banking, accounting, technology. And of course, at least 50% of the trade must be between the foreign country and the United States. One big customer is not enough. You need to have a volume. Just like with all of these, you know, when I mentioned that people who've lost their job can then, or can, you know, they've run out of H-1 visas, they can make an employer one of their clients, but it can't be the whole business model. And with the investors, your money must be at risk. That's the interesting thing about this. And some clients look at me strangely when I tell them, but you have to actually invest in the company before you can apply for the case. You can't just say, I'm going to buy this company if my visa is approved. However, being also a business law firm, there are some tricks to the trade. There's something called a condition precedent in a contract. And a condition precedent is a condition that comes before something. And for example, let's say that you're getting into a 5-year lease for business premises. You can make the condition precedent the approval of the L1 or the E2 so that you don't tie yourself up with a 5-year lease and then find out for whatever reason that your case got denied. And also, if any of you have criminal records, and I've had some really crazy stories, little things that people have done in their past that has prevented them from getting L's and E's. Please let your lawyer know, because we can file what's called a waiver. And some of them can get forgiven so that you can move on with your lives. If you've got something major, that's a whole different ball. Waivers are another video I'm going to have to prepare for you. Very, very complex area, but I find it a lot of fun. It's very challenging, and it's very rewarding when you win the case. You can bring in equipment and inventory. For example, if you bring things of your own into the company, let's say that you're involved in video production and you happen to have Kino flows, sand houses, cameras, this, that, everything. You can bring in that and get credit for that towards your $100,000 investment. You don't have to buy everything in the United States. But one thing that is very critical is a solid business plan with 3 or 5 year financial projections. The government needs to know that you know what you're talking about. They need to know that you have a plan and this is how you're going to do it. They also need to know that you don't intend on working at the company, that you intend on leading it, giving it focus and direction. But your job is not to compete with our own labor market. So a good business plan is great. You can buy software online and create your own. If you've never done one before, I'd give yourself 60 to 90 days, or you can hire us, or you can hire someone else to create a business plan. We'll review it free of charge for you so that it meets the requirements. Because the same business plan that you're preparing for a venture capitalist or a bank is not the business plan for the immigration department. 2 things you need to know in the business plan, by the way: SWOT analysis and key success factors. If you don't know what those are, you really need to know, and they need to be addressed. Key success factors: without this, I can't succeed. Just in summary: SWOT, strength, weakness, opportunity, threat. I see a ton of business plans where people don't even deal with these issues, and they are very critical, not just for the immigration department, which is called the CIS or USCIS, United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, or the embassy if you're filing abroad. But it's important for your own company. You need to know what your strengths and weaknesses are, and your opportunities and threats. At the bottom, you see it says greed is required, family rule. Gordon Gekko said greed is good. I'm not saying greed is good. I'm not saying it's bad. It depends on what your greed is for. But at the end of the day, the government is not looking for you to create a company that's going to support your family, and that's it. They want you to look at something that's going to grow, that's going to help our economy. It only makes sense. Otherwise, the rest of the world is simply going to apply for E2s. Instead of running their company in Canada, England, Spain, Italy, they'll run it out of the United States. That's not the idea. The idea is that you're going to grow something. And hopefully that is your intent rather than just to survive, because trust me, if you don't know your way around business, you know, it could be a very hurtful experience, especially if it's your first time as an entrepreneur. So that having been said, I hope this is giving you a good introduction. There are two ways of applying for a visa. You can come into the United States as a B1, which is a visitor for business, and you can explore opportunities, explore real estate, explore the competition, understand the playing field. The other way is, and by the way, once you've come in as a B1, you can do what's called a change of status and then change it to an E2 or an L1. The other way of doing that is applying directly with an embassy. However, an L1 still needs to be applied for first in the United States. You get an approval, and then it's shipped over to the embassy. It takes a little bit longer when you're doing it through embassy processing, but at the end of the day, sooner or later, you have to go to an embassy. They get to reevaluate your case, even if you've gotten it approved in the United States. And once the embassy gives you their blessing, then you can travel back and forth. But until then, if you do a change of status, because let's say you came from some foreign country into the United States on a B1 visa, you conducted a change of status, you're here, you're okay, your status has been approved, but you can't travel. I mean, you can sure travel out of here, you just can't travel back in. Big headache. So you will have to make that appointment with the embassy. Apart from that, this should give you a good groundwork on the E and the L. Let's talk about the EB5. Our website has a ton of information on the EB5. And there are two ways of getting in to the country with the EB5. There's what's called a regional center, and you can set up your own company. Myself, being an entrepreneur since I was 13, I prefer cases where somebody's setting up their own company. At the end of the day, the summary of the EB5, which I'm not a big fan of, to be honest with you, there are a lot of denials with the EB5. There's a lot of work involved, major investment that you don't have with the L1. So to me, I can take or leave the EB5, but let's say you're purchasing a motel, a hotel, or a resort of some kind. It's an easy fix. It's easy for you to get 10 employees, which is one of the requirements, and investing $500,000 if you're looking at a motel or a hotel, a resort. $500,000 is not a problem. It doesn't have to be all your money. For example, you can put $100,000 down and sign a personal note, not one guaranteed by your company, but a personal note for the rest of the money. Then that's counted towards your investment. And you have to do this for 2 years, and then finally you get an approval. That's one way of doing it. It's a way that I prefer. The other way is through a regional center. The government has allowed certain companies to be regional centers. In fact, we've created a regional center application that unfortunately the gentleman put a hold on because he got sick. But what it is an investment vehicle, and you can do it in anything. Let's say it's a hotel, and you can invest in this hotel. You can put in your money, and at the end of the day, you don't personally have to be responsible for hiring 10 people. There are various formulas that allow you to hire 10 people without actually physically hiring 10 people because of the derivative benefits that occur from it. And what happens with the EB5 is you later apply for the regional center. A couple of years later, you can have what's called the condition removed because there's a condition that you have to stay in it. And then again, regional centers, you know, we've had a number of fraudulent regional centers who are looking for foreign money. But you know, most of them are legitimate. But you have to do your research very thoroughly to make sure it's something you want to be involved in. Some keep you involved longer, some keep you less. Some give you profits, some don't give you profits. So there's a lot of, I mean, that's a discussion you really need to have one-on-one with your attorney, because it's a long discussion on what you want to do. I would prefer doing the L over that, but at the end of the day, with an EB5, kids under 21, mother, father, they all get green cards 2 years later. With the E and the L, you know, the children under 21 can come in, go to school, do this, do that. But what's wonderful in a relatively recent change, and not an overnight change, the government is now allowing spouses of an E or an L to have an unrestricted work permit in this country. They can work for you in your own company, or they can work for someone else, or they can switch jobs every week. They didn't have this before. And in fact, in the past, in the good old days, as I remember them, we'd have to get them both investing the same amount of money into an investment. And at the end of the day, sometimes you get one spouse approved and one denied on the equivalent case. And it got to be a little bit crazy, but it was still fun. I hope this has helped you understand this whole area, and I hope now you get what investment to the United States is all about. If you have any questions, give us a call, 619-677-5727, and I wish you every success in your venture. Thank you.